And because the MKE600 has a very good suppression of structure-borne noise, it makes one of the most versatile, all-round shotgun microphones on the market.
Your sadness in this bowl till you feel mine and changes in your body.
XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
This stream is powered by Wirecast, a powerful multi-input switching and graphics solution for live streaming in any situation.
The MKE600 is a shotgun microphone ideal for professional video camera applications. Maximal rejection of ambient side noises thanks to pronounced directivity. And because the MKE600 has a very good suppression of structure-borne noise, it makes one of the most versatile all-round shotgun microphones on the market.
Dip your sadness in this bowl till you feel minor changes in your body.
XS Wireless Digital is the perfect wireless audio solution for content creators and filmmakers. Thanks to a 2.4 GHz transmission, XS Wireless Digital is a truly plug-and-play system that allows you to upgrade your in-camera audio with one-button operation. With a variety of configurations to choose from, this entry point into the world of wireless will improve your workflow and will expand the possibilities of how you capture audio for your video. For more information, visit sennheiser.com/xswd.
This stream is powered by Wirecast, a powerful multi-input switching and graphics solution for live streaming in any situation.
The MKE600 is a shotgun microphone ideal for professional video camera applications. Maximal rejection of ambient side noises thanks to pronounced directivity. And because the MKE600 has a very good suppression of structure-borne noise, it makes one of the most versatile all-round shotgun microphones on the market.
Dip your sadness in this bowl till you feel mine and changes in your body.
Okay, hello, welcome to everyone who's joining us. Welcome to ProAV Live, and welcome Alister Chapman for our second live stream in about a week now. How are you doing?
Oh, good. Yes, good. Enjoying the sunshine streaming in through the windows.
Yeah, exactly.
Etc. Yes.
I like the artwork behind you. That's very, very on topic.
Yes. Yeah. So that was actually painted during a workshop I did for another dealer that I won't mention, but it wasn't in this in Holland. And part of the workshop, this guy was painting these pictures of subjects that people just threw out there, and somebody said, "Well, storm chasing." So that's the picture that came out of it. And
amazing.
It's me supposedly chasing a tornado. So yeah, it was quite good, quite a fun event.
And leads us on absolutely beautifully to the topic for today's stream. This is the first one in what I'm hoping is quite a series of ones talking to different people about their work, breaking down either specific projects like the one we're doing tomorrow with Ollie Kenchington, or a more broad sort of area that they work in, which is what this one is, because you have spent years now doing a very specific type of documentary work where you travel the world in some quite extreme environmental circumstances, really.
Yes.
We will definitely get onto that in a minute, but before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I just wanted to say thank you very much to everyone who's watching, firstly, but the live chat that's there alongside this video on YouTube, I can see that here, and I'm going to be fielding questions from that directly to Alistair throughout this. So if you've got any questions, anything you want us to discuss, anything we haven't discussed, anything like that, I really am very keen on the idea of these streams to be led entirely, as much as possible, by what you guys want to know, really, and led by the questions in that chat. So please do leave them there, and I can see them as they come in. Okay, do we want to start by showing a little example of some of your work?
Yeah, so this is just a short reel of just some examples of just some of the things that I do, just to give you a taste if you don't already know what it is that I do. So let's have a look at the reel.
There we go. I love the thunderclap at the end. Brilliant ending.
Yeah. So that's a little taste of what I do, that was just something I pulled off the computer this morning. So I travel a lot, all over the world, Asia, Europe, the States, you name it. I've pretty much been there. Making all kinds of documentary type production. I do a bit of drama as well these days, but my sort of history, my core is originally it was motorsports and motor racing, and then 20 years ago, it was actually 20 years ago, not quite to the day, but in a few weeks' time, 20 years ago, I got a commission from National Geographic to make a documentary about storm chasing.
Okay, I didn't realize this was the anniversary.
Well, yes, I only know because actually some of the pictures from or something popped up on my Facebook feed about it a couple of days ago from one of the people that I worked on the project with. So actually one of the guys that was very much involved in me getting that commission was Steve Backshall. And at the time he was a runner for Nat Geo, and I remember going in and meeting the guys there, and meeting Steve, who is this young guy whose career has really blossomed since then. So I thought what would be nice to look at was, I know it was 20 years ago, but things haven't really changed, is how do you get a commission? And we can look at that, because as an individual, that's something that's not easy to do. So we'll look a bit about how I got that commission with Nat Geo, and that once you've got one commission under your belt, it's a lot easier to get others because you've got track record. Then you've got history. You can say, well, look, I did this, and it's much easier. So how did I get that? And then we can look at some of the challenges that come with filming documentaries that involve travel, maybe hostile environments and stuff like that. But as we said, I think it really needs to be question-led. So I can waffle on for hours. We've got a load of PowerPoint slides we can show you if you really want to be bored, or you can ask questions, and then we can focus in on the stuff that you're interested in, on documentary production in general, shooting tips for severe weather, hazardous conditions, carnet travel, and all of that sort of stuff. So getting a commission. How did I get that first commission from National Geographic? Well, basically it's persistence, and it's all about just keep plugging at it. Your idea has to be original, and there has to be some sort of hook to it. I had a lot of discussions with Nat Geo after I got this, because I was really curious as to why I got this program commissioned. Mm-hmm. And the biggest mistake I think a lot of people make is that the pitch that they put in. So what I was doing was almost not quite monthly, but about every 3 months, is I would send out some program ideas that I had to various commissioning editors at various channels and stations around the world. And these were going out actually as emails. Mm-hmm. And the key thing is to keep it short and sweet. What Nat Geo told me, and I'm talking to other commissioning editors since, this is very, very much the case, is if you can't sell your idea in 2 paragraphs, you're wasting your time, because that's all they'll read. Because they get thousands upon thousands of these things arriving on their desks or on their assistants' desks, yep. And they have to filter them really quickly to get through to try and find the good ones. So if they're not hooked in the first paragraph, it goes in the bin.
I mean, so, I think that's going to be especially true nowadays with things like streaming platforms and stuff like that, where it's got to follow the same mental process for a commissioner as it does for an audience member sitting on their sofa at home, as in they're clicking through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things they could watch. It's got to have something which is instantly evident that means that they click on that one to watch rather than another one to watch.
Your pitch, your proposal is the same as a trailer for a movie.
Yeah.
And if the audience don't get it in the first 30 seconds, they're not going to go any further.
Yeah.
So you've really, and it's got to be really concise. So the pitch that I did for Twister Tours, the program was called Twister Tours, was on the equivalent of a single sheet of A4 paper on both sides, front and back. The front, essentially, first 2 paragraphs was the basic breakdown of the program, what it was about, why it was different, and then I think the 3rd paragraph was how quickly we could deliver it, and then on the back of that paper it had some very broad outlines of timescales, costs, and the other thing we highlighted in it were actually things that would be challenges. So, and I think by including the challenges, you show that you've really thought it through. So it's a bit like doing a risk assessment. Before you go into any project, you want to do a risk assessment to make sure that what you're doing is A, feasible, and B, not dangerous. So putting those challenges in there shows that you thought it through. It's like, so obviously challenges with making a program about the weather is the weather, because you don't know what it's going to do. And there's a very high risk actually that we could have gone out and shot and come back with absolutely nothing. And what were we going to do in that scenario? How would we work around that? And it was making a program basically using stock footage as to tell, to illustrate a lot of the story. But if you can't hook them in that first couple of paragraphs, don't bother. The rest is a waste of time. So do spend a lot of time and effort getting that just right and show it to friends. The other thing is, very often when you do a pitch, it'll be something that you know about or are passionate about or have learnt about. Mm-hmm. So you know the subject very, very well. And you read it and it might sound great to you, but you've got to show it to people that don't know the subject. Show it to somebody that's never ever seen or understand what you're doing and see, does it interest them? And if it doesn't interest them, it's not going to interest a commissioning editor either, unless that commissioning editor happens to be looking for something very special. And then it's keep at it. So the pitch for Twister Tours, I think I'd been circulating that one for almost 2 years at the time. And it just happened to land on the right desk on the right day. There was a new round of commissioning going on in Nat Geo. They had budget, which they hadn't had previous years when I'd sent it in previously. And it was just the right idea, right moment in time, right person's desk. So there's a lot of luck involved as well. So you do just have to keep at it. And once we got the commission, I was staggered at how quickly things moved, because I sent it in March, I think it was, and by April, the budget was in place and we were planning the shoot. It really happened very quickly.
Wow.
Once it happened.
March date.
Yeah, and I think that's something to be aware of, is that very often, because the broadcasters will have a budget for a year to use, that their financial year, generally same as most other financial years, April, but around to April again. So a good time to be pitching is just before the start of that financial year. So they'll know what money they're going to have in that year shortly before it starts. So if the ideas are landing on their desks when they know how much money they've got to spend, then they can start thinking about, well, we can afford that one, or we can't afford that, and everything else. If it arrives in the middle of the year, the budget's typically spent. It's all allocated. So it gets put on a back burner unless it's something particularly spectacular. So beginning of the year, January through March, is a really good time to be sending out those ideas. And also you need to have really thought about your budget and how quickly you can actually do it, because if they do come back to you, and it was one of the first questions actually that Nat Geo asked me when they came back and said, look, we're really interested in this, can you come in and have a meeting? And in that meeting it was like, right, when can you start shooting, and how much do you need to start shooting it, and when can you deliver it? And they wanted dates. Yeah, they weren't like, oh, I can do it in 6 months' time. It's like, no, what day, put a date in the diary, can you start shooting this? Because that's what they need to know. And then your next steps, things you have to start thinking about are production insurance. If you're doing a big production, and it was a relatively large budget, 20 years ago, it was £150,000 budget. So got a production insurance in place right from day one. That has to go in very, very early, because you've got to consider things like, if I'm taken ill and I can't continue the project, there's going to be the budget to hand it on to somebody else, and all of those things. And things happen really fast once they decide to go with it. So be ready for that. It's exciting.
I mean, the 1 month turnaround to start a big project like that, and presumably that was the biggest project of your career to date, was it?
Yes. By a long way. And in many
would be exciting.
Yeah, and in many respects, still
is. Yeah.
There are bigger projects I've worked on with bigger budgets and more money and things like that, and more complex projects. But as in terms of my career and everything else, it was a huge turning point in my career, because I'd gone from being a working cameraman. I produced stuff for other companies, but this was my own in-house production. And I think things I wasn't really prepared for was how much editorial control they wanted in the editing stage. You've got to remember that when you're being commissioned to make something for a broadcaster, it is their show. It's not your show anymore. It's your idea, it's your concept. You have to deliver on your idea and your concept. But at the same time, because they're putting all of the money forwards, they want what they want. So they want very specific things. And working with National Geographic in particular, we have to be really careful about timelines of how the story is told. You can't distort the truth in any way. All sorts of legal stuff, checking on dates and facts, and a lot of fact checking. So post-production was quite. There was a lot more work than I'd anticipated. It wasn't just a case of editing it and grading it.
Oh, sure. It's not the post-production work. It's the politics around everything involved. We're getting some fantastic questions coming in, by the way, which we'll try and get onto when it fits the topic. But a brilliant one's just come in from Nick Malkin again, who joined us for our Friday stream from Australia. He on commissions, he says, how does the competition compare for Nat Geo specifically between a series, short film and features? Do they tend to have a bit of a preference as to the form factor of work that they like?
The honest answer there is I don't know. So I would speculate, though, that knowing Nat Geo is they like a mix of both, with the emphasis on series. From watching the channel, it's predominantly series. I mean, generally speaking, TV series are really good for documentaries, because it's something that can grow an audience over the weeks that it's shown. Relatively speaking, from a cost point of view, it tends to be more cost effective, because each if you're producing 10 of something, you've got the same end credits and titles and presenters, and it shares your budget.
More content for the same amount of money.
Yeah, so it tends to be more cost effective, and generally they want 6 or 12 or even 13 episodes, whatever.
Sure.
And it tends to be what is wanted these days. So since I did Twisted Tools, so Twisted Tools was a special, and that was a Nat Geo special, and Nat Geo still are one of the few companies that will do that. I think now with Netflix and people like that, and Amazon, that is now an area that's opening up again to do specials. But even there, I think there is more of a demand, and I think there's also more of an appetite from the consumer, the audience, for series now. People like something to get stuck into these days.
Sure.
So I think a series is going to be easier to get commissioned than a one-off. But if the idea is there, if the idea is solid, don't be put off from putting in ideas for one-off programs.
Yeah.
I mean, BBC, people like that, very difficult, I think, to get a one-off. But Nat Geo, Discovery, you might, if it's something special.
Sure, fantastic. Right, so let's get on to some of the specifics of the projects that you do, rather than commissioning documentaries as a whole. Because there's some absolutely fascinating stuff, and some people already got some questions about time lapses and things like that. Is there anything we want to touch on with some of the work in that demo reel in particular?
Yeah, so in the demo reel, I mean, there's a lot of time lapse in that demo reel. I mean, I don't want to put myself down, but time lapse done well, done nicely is a great way of shooting great video very easily. It always looks dramatic, it always looks impressive, and it's relatively speaking quite easy to do.
The easy thing with it is to get the wow factor. Wow factor is very hard to get in normal footage. In time lapse, it's a lot easier. It's still obviously incredibly challenging to do the time lapses, especially if the quality in that reel. But achieving that wow factor, which is a real golden nugget of video production, is certainly easier in time lapse than normal 25p footage.
So let's start at the beginning of a typical. Let's take one of my storm shoots. It's one of my specialities. I do a lot of them. Hence the picture that's over my shoulder. So I would actually normally now, April coming into May, be planning for my annual trip to the US to go and shoot storms. And it would be now that I'm starting to think about what gear am I going to need for this trip. So it's not last minute. I possibly, if I was going this year, I'd be flying out more than likely mid-May. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, for storms, is there a time of year, presumably, when it's...
Yeah, so you have tornado season in the States, which has started, and there's been a lot of tornadoes this year already. Unfortunately, quite a few fatalities as well. It's been a bad year so far. But the sort of the core of tornado season is May. So that's normally May and into early June when I normally go. So whatever shoot you're doing, it's a really good idea. I don't actually do a storyboard, but it's a very good idea to have, at least in your mind, in your head, a storyboard. So I'm hopeless at drawing, so I'll write down the shots that I aim to get, what it is that I want to come back with.
A shot list.
Shot list. And then from that list, I start thinking about, well, what techniques am I going to have to use? What methods am I going to need to do to get those shots? And then that then grows into a wish list of equipment to get all of the different sorts of shots that I want. And that's everything from tripods to cameras to time intervalometers, sliders, the lot. Then I need to start thinking about, right, so I'm going to be flying to the US to do this, and then once I get there, traveling around in a hire car. And then you start getting into things like, well, even with the car, forget the flying for a minute, that's one challenge. But even in a car, there's a limit to how much gear you can take. And if you're trying to work quickly, you need to be efficient. So while very often for time lapse, a DSLR is very often the best tool from an image quality point of view, great big frames that you can capture when you're taking stills, 50 megapixel cameras these days, huge frames that you can crop into in post and all of that sort of stuff. They do tend to be a little bit fiddly with an intervalometer and setting it up and getting it all right. And if I'm going to shoot video as well, that's another camera on top of the video camera. Mm-hmm. So then I have to start thinking about, well, what's my priority? Is it video or is it time lapse? And if it's really video and time lapse is the bonus, then I'll start focusing on a video camera that can do time lapse, mm-hmm. and just to keep that kit list down to a reasonable.
I guess really by video camera that can do time lapse, you mean one that can go down to a very slow sort of frame rate and shutter speed, like 1 frame a second, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, 1 frame a second is what I shoot most of the time lapse that I do at, because mm-hmm. you can always speed it up more in post-production. Mm-hmm. If you start doing really long intervals, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, those bigger long intervals, yeah, great. You can turn an hour of storm motion into a lovely 20-second long clip. But if you need a longer clip, you're screwed. You don't have the information. Yeah. So I'd rather do the 1 second interval, and instead of having a 20-second clip, I've got a 3 or 4 minute long clip, which still doesn't take up any space on my cards or my media or any appreciable size. Yep. And then I can speed it up and slow it down. I can even ramp it in post-production and do a lot more with it. So I'll always use a much shorter interval than perhaps I need when I'm doing time lapse. And another thing while I'm at this point is that when I'm doing these time lapse of the storms, one of the things that I want to try and capture is if there is lightning in the storm, is to capture the light. So what you then want is a long exposure. You don't want a big interval where the camera is going click, taking the picture, nothing, 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 click, taking the picture, because invariably the lightning happens in all the nothing, nothing, nothing bits. So by doing a 1 second interval with some really strong ND filters in the front of the camera, as well as built-in ND if it's got it, I can then go to a 1 second interval with a 1 second exposure, so that I'm also capturing any lightning that's going on within the storm. So that tends to be why I end up at that 1 second interval for most of what I do, and then speed it up later if I need to. Of course, when you speed it up, you do risk losing some of those lightning bolts, because they'll be in the skipped frames. But then some of the shots you get into actually editing the time lapse and just taking the lightning bolts out and making sure and cutting all the frames in between and doing that can take hours in post.
I bet it can. Talking about time frames, we had an interesting question from Robert Mumford, who says there's some great looking time lapse in that reel. How long would you need to be in one place to get the shots that you needed?
Well, that depends on how quickly what you're shooting is moving. Mm-hmm. Now, in that reel, most of those storms, they're actually moving surprisingly fast. So and again, this is why I'm a 1 second interval person, is that a lot of those storm shots, they're probably only 10 minutes of shooting time, if that. So
find a frame, now leave it for 10 minutes and then go? Or do you mean you have 10 minutes to find your frame, shut it up, shoot everything and move on?
Yeah, both. So one of the things that we're going to share in the comments is a link to a behind the scenes film that was... it's a project that I worked on for Philips, the TV manufacturer, to show off some of their latest HDR TVs. Mm-hmm. And it's a storm chasing trip that we did with them. And they've got lots of behind the scenes footage of the shoot. And one of the things that when I'm doing the storm chasing that I have to be really careful of is being able to move very, very quickly. So in the Philips behind the scenes film, you'll see there's one point where we were pretty close to being struck by lightning. The lightning struck within about 30 meters of where we were standing. And suddenly we were in this situation where lightning was coming down very close, very frequently. Now, sometimes you'll get a close by lightning strike, and then it's the one and only one, and there's nothing else close by for the rest of the day. But this was getting really dangerous. So you need to be able to get in and out of the car really fast. And this is where part of the planning for the shoot comes in. So it's having quick draw bags for the camera, so that in the very back of the car. And we tend to use people carrier, minivan or people carrier for that. So it's a big open tailgate. And there'll be a quick draw bag in the back of the van that you can just put the camera straight into. And obviously a quick release on the tripod. So while we're filming one of those time lapses of the storm coming towards us, I'm always looking around. Where's the lightning? Are we in a lightning threat, lightning risk? And the moment that the lightning's getting too close, it's just go. There's no hanging around. So the camera comes off the tripod with, it's pulling the quick release cameras off the tripod in one hand, camera in the other. And it's why I use the vehicles with a big boot space, is that then the tripod will just go straight into the back of the car without folding it down. And the camera just goes straight into the bag, and we're back on the road in 10, 20 seconds.
What's the team like?
Well, sometimes it's just me. I quite often just go on my own. Or I do take people if there's something they're interested in shooting in, but don't know enough about storms and everything else to do it for themselves, I'll take people along. So generally 3 people at the most. So there's space for everybody's cameras right at the back of the vehicle. So we don't know. This is the thing. This is one of the challenges with adventure documentary shooting in general. You just don't know what you're going to encounter. A point in case was last year shooting, and actually I still to this day, and something I should do is actually get around to editing this and grading this footage, is I was chasing a storm that turned into what's called a haboob, which is a dirt and dust storm. And this storm went through a wind farm, and it's this wall of sand, like a sandstorm, but this is in Texas, coming through this wind farm. Absolutely amazing shots, because you could just see this wall of dirt and dust, and the turbines in the wind farm were disappearing one at a time into this wall. It was like something out of the Mummy, the movie The Mummy, or something, or
Mad Max or something. Yeah,
biblical soil and dirt coming towards me.
Wow.
And you have 20 seconds, 30 seconds to get a shot. So it's stop the car, find a good spot, nice wind turbines in the shot, get out, shoot, get those shots, move, next position. Now, that was not something I was expecting to get that day at all. Totally unpredictable. That's a very unusual storm. And so when you're doing any form of adventure documentary, you just don't know what you're going to get. When I do the Northern Lights trips, we don't know what the aurora is going to do from one night to the next night. When we go off on the snow scooters to do filming up on the Finnmarksvidda, which is the sort of the Arctic plateau, which is just this Arctic wasteland, we could go up there and we could find a herd of reindeer, or we could go up there and the weather closes in and we get a snowstorm or blizzard that can happen very, very quickly. Shooting in rainforests and places like that, you're going to get thunderstorms that are going to come very quickly, very suddenly, and suddenly everything's soaking wet. So this is a big part of adventure documentary production, is being prepared for whatever Mother Nature throws at you, and having an escape plan. I think that's very important, whether we're doing the Northern Lights and the aurora and we go off on the snowmobiles, is what happens if the snowmobile breaks down? How do we get back? Or if we're going storm chasing, what do we do if the car breaks down? Or what do we do if the storm overtakes us? What is our escape route? How do we get out of this storm? All of those things, I think you have to thinking
with the storms. I mean, what is the escape route? That would seem like, okay, if the car breaks down, you're not going to go anywhere because it's huge American countryside, and then the storm is just going to catch up with you, and you're going to be in the middle of that storm.
Yeah, and that is a big risk. And I mean that's why, actually, and I know it's terrible for the environment, we never stop the engines. So when we pull over and the storm is coming towards us, when we know we're only going to be there for 3 or 4 minutes to film the storm, we don't turn the engine off.
Sure.
You just are running, because the last thing you want is, especially given that we're charging batteries in the car and doing all sorts of things that could lead to a potentially a flat battery, is you never
don't have to rely on an ignition
in those sorts of situations. And if the vehicle becomes stuck or something like that, your escape plan is to first of all try and find a very solid structure or building. If not, you're going to lie in a ditch if it's a tornado or something like that. I mean, hail and things like that, most things you just ride it out in the car, and strong wind. But for tornadoes, you don't want to be in a car. You want to be in a ditch, low-lying ground, or something like that. So so all of that stuff is certainly being considered all of the time. So this comes back to where we started. It is all about planning, and I think this is why, being very careful with the kit that you take. A couple of years ago, I went on a trip up to Norway, Northern Lights trip, and by the end of the trip, I realized that I hadn't actually used half of the gear that I'd taken. And I was actually very angry with myself about that, because that was bad planning. So we'd been lugging around extra tripods and cameras and controllers and lenses that basically never came out of their bags. And it's like, well, what's the point? And there is the risk then, if you're moving all that gear around, of it getting damaged, especially in harsh environments. So I was quite annoyed with myself. And then the year following that, last year, I took much less gear and actually shot more, because I wasn't as snowed under by kit.
Concentrate. Take the right gear, not more gear. Yeah.
So I'd figured out exactly which shots I could do with exactly which camera. I knew exactly which shots I was going to do with which camera, and as a result, I was shooting faster, more efficiently, and I actually came back with a lot more material. So sometimes you can take too much gear and you get bogged down in the kit. It's like, and if you're taking sliders and jibs and all of this stuff, you've got to know how the slider works. You've got to know how to put the jib together. You've got to know how this, that, and everything else. And there's nothing worse than, there's this once in a lifetime storm and you're trying to get that shot and you can't remember how to program the time lapse slider. It's just like,
yeah, exactly. Anything that's a bit too complicated is just going to go out of the question in some where you're up against timing so much.
And you miss the shot. It's like, it's all very, sometimes, with time lapse and sliders and those things, they produce amazing material when it's done right. I mean, that motion is just wonderful. But if you're wasting 10 minutes trying to program it, you've missed the shot. So you're better off in that case just doing a locked off shot on a tripod or on a low tripod or floor stand, whatever you've got, getting the shot and manipulating it in post rather than messing around with the slider, because I'd rather have the shot than not have the shot.
So should we talk about some of the equipment that is your go-to choices?
Yes. So it evolves, it changes depending on the project and the shoot. So
knowing you though, I'm assuming it's Sony.
Oh, of course. Yeah. So for a long time, for many years, the go-to camera for me was my F5 with the R5 RAW recorder, shooting 4K RAW on that camera. That's now been supplanted by the FX9, and looking forward to hearing what's coming for that very soon. I'm sure there's going to be some announcements in the next couple of weeks on the firmware updates for that camera, which I'm hoping will, of course, include the RAW that's been mentioned already. So, what you want is a nice, solid video camera that you're familiar with. But for adventure documentary and stuff like that, you can't beat owning your own kit, because then you use it all the time. You know how it works. You know how you've assigned your buttons. You know how long it takes to boot up and all of that sort of stuff. So it makes you much faster to work with.
Absolutely.
So my main camera will now be the FX9. It was previously the F5. I've got an FS5 as well, and I really like the FS5. The FS5, Sony got that camera right. A lot of people criticize it because it's only got 8-bit, and there's a few things on it that are a bit limited and things like that. But it's really small, it's really compact, it uses very little power, and I will very often take that actually with an Atomos Shogun to shoot extra bits of RAW, because that will do 4K RAW at 120 frames per second.
It's a very practical little camera, isn't it? It's a very sensible, it's really nice to film with.
And it doesn't take up a lot of space in your kit. So I'm, taking the F5 and F55, I will take one Atomos Shogun and the FS5. And if I'm not using the FS5, then the Shogun goes on the F5, 55 as a monitor. But every now and again, I'll just have the FS5 set up that I can just plonk on another tripod, a little low tripod or something like that for shots like that. Then, of course, the A7S for time-lapse. Different versions, A7Ss and also A7Rs, depending on what's flavor of the month, what I can beg, borrow, or scrounge. And actually, one camera, just looking at I've got a shelf with cameras on over there, actually, that I use a huge amount, actually, is the little A6300 from Sony.
Oh, okay.
The little Alpha A6300. I've had that camera since it first came out. It does great time lapse. You can get a little external controller for it, intervalometer. It's APS-C, so I could use all the same lenses as I would use on the F5 and 55 and the FS5 on that camera. Whereas if you're using an A7S, A7R, you want full frame. And it again, it's tiny. And I very often used to, when I'm doing the storm chasing, I'll often have the A6300 just in my jacket pocket with just a little, I can't remember what the kit lens is that comes with it. It's little short zoom lens. It's something like a 18 to 45 millimeter or something like that. Pancakes. Sure. And I can just grab extra stuff with that camera and it fits in my pocket. And now I'm starting to go far too many cameras. So generally out of that range of cameras, I'll whittle it down. And very often if it's just two cameras, it'll be the A6300 and the FX9. Because the A6300, okay, it's not as sensitive as an A7S, A7R, but it can still do great time lapse. It takes no space whatsoever. With a battery grip on the bottom, the batteries run for a really long time. It costs pennies, relatively speaking.
Yeah, I'm not sure it literally costs pennies.
No,
but
it's not an expensive camera. I can put it on the dash of the car as a dash cam. I can
certainly cheaper than your F5 with R7 recorder.
Yeah, and cheaper than an A7S and all of those. And it's also lighter. So I can do a lot of sort of GoPro type shots with it on a very small suction mount on the windscreen of the car.
Yep.
So
behind the scenes, it must be brilliant.
Yeah, all of that sort of stuff with that one camera. So I've actually, one of the things I've shot a lot of with that maybe I haven't put online is shooting thunderstorms from the air. So when I fly to the US to go storm chasing, because I'm flying into the US in the middle of storm season, and when you leave the UK to fly to the States, you're generally going to land in the evening or late afternoon in the US. And that's prime time storm time. And if you're flying into Oklahoma City or Dallas or somewhere like that in May, there's actually a really high probability that you're going to end up flying around thunderstorms to get there. And just having that A6300 that you can stick in the pocket of the seat in front of you or whatever gives you the ability to shoot 4K video out of the window of the plane. Should something, should you find yourself flying around a nice thunderstorm with some lightning going on outside? Yes, you could do it with a bigger camera, but what typically happens is if you've got a window seat, you look out the window, oh, there's a storm coming. And then the plane starts bouncing around and the seatbelt sign is on and you've got the two people sat next to you. You can't get up to get a camera out of the overhead bin.
No.
You're not going to do your whole flight, especially if there's a transatlantic flight with a FX9 sitting on your lap. So just having that 6300 in the pocket just allows you to get so much stuff. And it really is surprising how much of that stuff I end up using, even though from a technical standpoint it's not as good as the other cameras. It's that old saying, isn't it, the best camera that you've got is the one that's in your hand.
Sure.
It's having something small, accessible, lightweight that you can just grab, really surprisingly good footage with. And there's the newer one now, there's the A6500 as well that they have, but my A6300 is still going strong. God knows how many cycles the shutter on that camera is at now.
So we've had a couple of good questions coming in. One that I quite liked was from Robert Mumford, who said, how essential is shooting in RAW to get what you need? Is it for acquisition or a requirement for delivery? Good question. So how essential is it? Being perfectly honest, it's not. But I sell a lot of stock footage, and acquiring in the highest quality that you can is never a bad thing. I mean, in terms of requirement for delivery, do you keep that in mind? Is that's your stock footage, presumably, on 90% of these storm shoots?
If you shoot something like that, or you shoot something in RAW, you can deliver it to anybody, anywhere, anytime. You're not going to get better quality than that. So it opens many, many doors. If I was to go out and shoot on XAVC-I, great codec, not putting XAVCI down at all. And of course, the FX9 has a new encoding chip in it now, so it's even better than it used to be.
Okay.
So the XAVCI is a really great codec, but some people don't want to buy XAVCI content. They'd rather have ProRes or something.
And you never know where you're working with stock footage. You never know where it's going to be shown. I mean, where has your stock footage clips been shown? You've had some quite
all like movies, feature films. Yeah. I've got footage in feature films, Day After Tomorrow, and movies like that. And when that level, yes, it's got to be good. I mean, they either want film or they want the highest possible quality digital acquisition. So I'm really looking forward to getting the RAW options with the FX9 and being able to shoot with the FX9 in RAW. I wouldn't have given up my F5 and the R5 RAW recorder if the FX9 wasn't going to be getting RAW, to be honest. I think I'd have probably still be using the F5. Even though the FX9 does produce a superior image, that having that as RAW for stock footage sales for me is important. But the other thing is not to be afraid of RAW. Is that modern RAW, if you're shooting ProRes RAW in particular, or something like XOCN from Sony, or Sony's compressed RAW, and all the other compressed RAW formats that are out there now, it's really surprisingly easy to work with. XOCN was designed to be really easy to edit and grade, and in fact my laptop, which is what I'm using for streaming right now, can cope with RAW just as easily as it does with XAVC. It's absolutely not a problem to work with. The file, the amount of data that you're recording with RAW is a third of what it would be with component YCB CR video. So it's actually a relatively efficient format. The files, yes, they're big because they're very lightly compressed. But if something like ProRes RAW, FX9 with a Shogun, or whatever the recorder is going to be that you're going to use with that, it'll be compressed. So they're not, no bigger than ProRes files, and cheap SSD media. So your media is as cheap as it gets. So it's a really powerful way to shoot, and it's not hard, it's not difficult. So why not? Is perhaps the question.
Yeah. Changing tact a little bit, another quite interesting question from the same guy, Robert Mumford. Any stories of kit that was lost or damaged and lessons you learned from that experience? Have you ever had to just ditch something at the side of the road and drive away from that storm?
No. I've wrecked over the years. I think I've only actually destroyed one camera. And that wasn't storms, that was a Northern Lights trip.
Okay.
So that was a Northern Lights trip. I was against this from the very beginning. This was another one of these Philips films that we shot, and it was shooting the Northern Lights and a whole Arctic adventure. So it was going up to Norway and shooting Northern Lights, but we did dog sledding, we did trekking, all sorts of things in the snow and everything else. But one of the things they wanted to do was to sail the fjords in the middle of the Arctic winter and film the Northern Lights from a sailing boat. And I was like, no, that's not going to work. I mean, for a start, it's going to be ridiculously cold. Everything's going to be icy, so the deck of the boat's going to be covered in ice. It's rough seas and storms. I was against it from day one. We were on this yacht, and I was trying to film. We had another cinematographer who was the star of the show, as it were. And I was filming her on the yacht. She's taking photographs, and I'm trying to film her with an FS5. And I'm getting all arty and creative. And this is a yacht, a single-hulled yacht, so we're in quite a storm, actually. The wind was howling. So the yacht's heeling over at a hell of an angle like this. There's waves breaking over the bow. It's all dramatic and spectacular stuff. There's ice everywhere. So I'm clipped onto the boat. I've got a safety line and everything else. And I was just trying to get this really dramatic shot. So I've got the camera and I'm leaning out over the side of the boat with the camera, trying to get this shot, looking up through the wires and the rigging at this girl taking these pictures. And I was getting some great footage and everything else. And then just completely out of the blue, this huge wave that was far, far bigger than anything else we'd seen just came over the side of the boat and completely swamped me, the camera, her, everything. and that was the end of the of that FS5. It didn't survive.
No, seawater is a killer. Really
yeah,
is.
So
Few things can kill a camera quite like seawater can.
I used to film windsurfing. So I used to film the World Windsurfing Tour, and that used to destroy cameras. That was a camera wrecker.
Yep.
You're filming on boats all the time, and of course windsurfing needs wind, so there's always a lot of spray and surf. And that you go away, you do a week shoot, you come back, and the cameras are all fuzzy and furry on the outside where the aluminium corroded. So we used to, a great trip actually for seawater corrosion is vinegar. So dilute vinegar. I can't remember which is 1,000.
Tip it over the sensor like that.
No. You need about 1 part vinegar to 100 to 50 parts water, something like that. It's very, very dilute, but just white, clear vinegar, because got to get the right way. And I think the salt is alkaline and the vinegar is acid, and that they neutralize each other. So the vinegar will stop the corrosion.
That's corrosion on the outside of the body, to be clear.
Yeah. So you get salt spray, stuff like that on the outside of your kit. Just a damp cloth with a very dilute vinegar solution in it will stop the corrosion from happening. And if you just wipe the camera down with it and just leave it, don't wipe, just let it air dry, that solution stays on the camera. So next time you get into a salt spray situation, it neutralizes the salt before it does any damage.
Okay.
So it's a really good thing to do. I mean, yeah, over the years, I mean, I've had cameras, dunked cameras in water and all sorts. And the first thing, sometimes you get away with it, but the key thing is to get the power off the camera straight away, quick as you can, because it's the power that does the damage. So get your battery off the camera as fast as you can. If the camera's had a good dunking in, or anything, phones, you drop your phone in the sea or whatever. If something's had a really good dunking in salt water, then you want to put it in a bucket of fresh water. I know it seems a horrible thing to do. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to make it even worse. But if it's really if the water's got inside that piece of kit, then you want to put it in a bucket of fresh water to neutralize that salt, because the salt is just so destructive.
It's absolutely a killer. Robert is asking, did the footage survive? Anything on that SD card?
It did. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. The SD card was absolutely fine. The footage was all there, and it got used in the show. So yeah, the footage made it to the end program. I mean, filming hurricanes, I mean, they're potentially camera killers. And really though, but a lot of this stuff you can mitigate. It's about having good camera covers, rain covers, really important. And I see a lot of cameramen these days that go off and they shoot and they don't put a rain cover on their camera because they think, oh, a little bit of rain, it's not going to hurt. But it only takes one raindrop in the wrong place to wreck a perfectly good camera.
Yep.
A lot of cameras these days have connectors on the top, because a lot of cameras have GPS and things like that in the handles and things like that. And you get, in a shower of rain, a bit of water on the top of that camera gets into one of those connectors, gets inside the camera, does a lot of damage.
Do you have particular ones you like to use? Do you use the Portabrace ones or?
Camraid.
Camraid?
I like the Camraid covers.
Okay.
The reason I like the Camraid covers is the fabric that they use is very, very soft, and it doesn't rustle. It doesn't make any sound. So it's really
brilliant. Okay.
So it's noise-free fabric. So if you've got to get under the cover to change a setting on the camera, there's not rustle, all these horrible noises. And generally, they make the covers extendable. So if using different length lenses, you can either add a Velcro section on to make it longer, or you can roll it to make it longer or shorter, depending on what you're doing. And they have tailored covers for most cameras. And if I'm going to go out and shoot something where there's even the remotest chance of rain or dust as well, that's the other thing that can do your camera a lot of damage, I'll have a cover on it. You spend all this money on these cameras. They're £10,000 is a lot of money. Yes, you can insure them, you can do all of that sort of stuff, but you don't want to keep claiming on your insurance,
and you don't want your production to stop because you got rain on your camera.
Well, that's the big thing, isn't it? I mean, all insurance in the world isn't going to allow you to carry on shooting if your camera's trashed.
Yeah, they're tools. You need tools.
Yeah, I mean, I go out and shot hurricanes, and in hurricanes, the nearest thing I can think to is like being in a washing machine. You go outside, and you are soaked from head to toe within moments. So I don't actually, with hurricanes, we don't bother wearing waterproof clothing. There's just no point because you will be wet. So you just wear a t-shirt and shorts because actually
once they get wet, they're lightweight.
Yeah, and when your clothes are wet, you get cold. Whereas if your skin is wet, it's not nearly as cold as wearing wet clothes.
Okay.
So a pair of shorts and a t-shirt in a hurricane. But for the camera, you can't afford for that to get wet. So then that really needs a very, very good waterproof cover, often taped up and to make sure that the wet can't get in anywhere. But you will have problems with lenses fogging up and all of that. The moisture will get in, but it's fortunately it's just rain, so it's not salt water generally. So then you have to deal with fogging lenses and all of those sorts of things.
So we talked about rain covers and the cameras that you use, and even you mentioned quick release tripod systems. Are there any other key little bits of kit that are something that you would always take with you?
Chamois leather.
Okay.
Yeah, so ordinary lens cloths are hopeless when the lens is wet. So you get a few raindrops on the front of your lens, you get your ordinary whatever
microfiber
fiber lens cloth out, and you try and wipe your lens, and all it does is smears it round and round and round, just makes a smear mess on the front of the lens. And if you're shooting in the rain and you're constantly getting drops of rain on the lens, and every time you wipe it, it just ends up getting worse and worse and worse. Chamois leather, the leathers that you buy for drying your car or polishing a car when you wash your car. So you wash the car and you dry it with these leather cloths called a chamois leather, spelled CHAMOIS, I think, chamois leather. Buy them in a car accessory shop. They are brilliant lens cloths because even when they're wet, they work. So your chamois leather can be soaking wet, and when you wipe the lens, it absorbs the moisture and takes the moisture off the lens.
Presumably you have UV filters on the front of those lenses to stop any.
If I'm doing stuff like that, because you get dust and dirt and everything.
Absolutely.
Else. But the chamois leather is just a brilliant thing for shooting in the rain, for wiping down your lens. And then at the end of the day, you can use a damp chamois leather to wipe the camera down and put it in the washing machine. And you just chuck it in the washing machine when you're done. And then it comes out nice and clean. Another thing on lens cloths as well, I think a lot of cameramen make a mistake here, is put your lens cloth in a Ziploc bag and keep it closed. I see so many cameramen that just have their lens cloth in the camera bag without any protection. And you've only got to go out and shoot somewhere a bit dusty one day, and that lens cloth might have some dust on it. And you go to clean Megabuck's lens, and one wipe, and it's scratched and it's ruined.
Yep.
So keep the lens cloth in a Ziploc bag between use.
Brilliant tip.
You know, it's such a simple thing, and it's so easy to do, and it costs nothing, but it could save you a lot of money from a scratched or damaged lens. Other things, from shooting all this stuff that I do over the years, dry pair of socks in your bag. You know, if you get wet feet, there's nothing worse than walking around in wet feet and wet socks for ages. Just a dry pair of socks. And bin bags, black bin bags, so useful for so many things. Obviously for taking rubbish home at the end of the day of your shoot, but also impromptu rain cover for the camera. Cut 3 holes in the top of it, and it can become an impromptu rain jacket for yourself. You know, it's, again, they cost nothing. And yes, it might look like you're being a cheapskate and being daft if you've got one on your camera as a rain cover, but you know, it's better than a trash camera.
Certainly is. A nice one maybe to finish on, because we're nearing the end of the hour mark. Tashi Norden, who is from the Himalayas, which is pretty incredible, has just put a nice little comment to finish on. What do you like shooting these days? So what of all these adventure, documentary and all that sort of stuff, after 20 years of doing it, Alistair, what have you settled on as the stuff that you enjoy doing the most and you're keen to do more of? What's your favourite projects to do right now?
20 years of shooting storms, I'm still passionate about shooting storms.
Okay, you're not getting bored of that?
No, not bored of it yet, because every time I go storm chasing, I see something different. You know, last year we had the haboobs, and I'd not seen them like that before. We might get different sorts of lightning. I think, and it's still something that I want to get. I'm still not happy that I have. So in that demo reel, there's some nice footage in there, but there are some real classic types of storms that I've got in HD when I was shooting in HD. that look like stacks of plates. They really do look like these layer cakes going up into the sky, and the whole thing is
so like
spinning,
rings. Yeah,
rings, and
rings
very
of
often
clouds,
greens and blues and all sorts of colors.
Wow.
And that's what I wanted to get in very high quality 4K or greater resolution.
So do you find yourself having a bit of a storm wish list, a bit of a bucket list of storm things, like before I give up and retire, I want to have captured this, and this?
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky in the first 5 years of storm chasing that I did. I saw the best storms that I've ever seen in that first 5 years. And I kind of, in a way, trying to relive my youth, if that's a better word for it, because I want to capture that stuff again. A lot of that was in standard definition. So that first program we did for Nat Geo, of course, was standard definition. I mean, groundbreaking at the time. It was in widescreen. It was 16:9. But we saw amazing stuff then. I mean, one of the tornadoes in that was a mile wide. And we were really relatively close to it, and we just got stunning footage. And I've not been able to repeat that since. And it's not through, well, some of it's through lack of trying. I mean, to get a decent tornado, really, you need to spend about a month in the US in the spring, and that's an expensive thing to do. Huge amounts of traveling. I mean, we travel 5,000, 6,000 miles a week on a storm chasing trip, if not more. Long days and everything else. So this stuff isn't easy to get. I think that's part of the challenge for me, is that it isn't easy. So getting that. Storm chasing's become much harder now, because when I first started doing it, there was virtually nobody doing it. Now there's anywhere up to 1 million people out storm chasing in Oklahoma in May. It's just ridiculous. So there's traffic jams and roadblocks and congestion. So that makes it hard. But there's still lots of things I would like to see and do. There's a lake in the north of Argentina that has these incredible lightning storms almost every day, and I'd love to go and shoot that. I'd really like, and I've seen photographs, is a severe thunderstorm with lightning bolts coming out of it with the northern lights behind it.
Oh wow, yeah.
It can happen. That's probably going to have to wait another 5 years for that, for the solar cycle to
combines the two big areas, if you want. That would be quite an opener for a showreel, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so you go to the northern US states when at the peak of the solar cycle, and sometimes you'll see that in sort of Minnesota or southern Canada. Places like that. And the other thing I really, really want to get the budget to have a go at, and there's a couple of things here, is sprites, red jets and blue jets above severe thunderstorms. So you get the lightning bolts that come out of the bottom of severe thunderstorms, and they might be 1 or 2 miles long, the lightning bolts, and really bright and really spectacular. But if you go 50, 60 miles, maybe 100 miles away from the thunderstorm, so you can see over the top of the thunderstorm, so the thunderstorm's right low on the horizon, you get this phenomenon called red sprites and blue jets that are tremendous bursts of energy that go out from the top of the storm out into space. And it's only fairly recently that the cameras have become sensitive enough to be able to photograph and video, even better now, to video these things. And they are absolutely spectacular to see. I've seen them, but not yet photographed and videoed them. Cameras, when I saw them, weren't sensitive enough. Now we've got the FX9, I think, is sensitive enough to do it, is to shoot those. And what I'd really like to do is shoot them from the air. So I do know somebody that happens to own a private jet equipped with camera gimbals and things like that. So we've had some discussions about shooting severe storms from the air, which would be quite something. So there you go.
Something.
It would. Maybe one day. Maybe one day
indeed. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much for all that. It's absolutely fascinating. I think we could talk for another 3 hours on all the different aspects of that if we really wanted to. But let's call it wraps there. If there's appetite for more, we can always do more streams on this or similar subjects. Like, for example, we haven't really touched on auroras very much at all. So that could maybe be a whole topic for another live stream.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really touched on shooting in hot environments and cold environments. What that can do.
No, we could break it down a bit more specifically maybe for next time and do another one in a few weeks' time.
Yep.
So thank you very much to everyone who joined us, and thank you for all your questions. That was absolutely fantastic. That was exactly, we didn't have to dig out those boring PowerPoint slides at all, did we?
No, none of them.
Okay, so tomorrow I'm going to be joined by Alister Chapman, who, no, not Alister Chapman, you're Alister Chapman, Ollie Kensington, who's going to be talking about his work with Byron Burgers. He's made a series of social media stings for them for the summertime social media campaign, which is quite interesting to break down how he made them on quite a short, little, quick turnaround budget. And so that's going to be tomorrow. And then I'm hoping to do one with Red. It's not quite confirmed yet, but there might be a stream coming with Red towards the end of the week. So stay tuned for that as well. And of course, I'll be releasing next week's worth of content. But for now, thank you very much, Alister, for all of your help and your wisdom.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Thanks for the questions.
No problem at all. And we will see you all very soon. I will share in the comment section, by the way, that behind the scenes video that Alister was talking about. I think it was about 15 minutes long. Was it, Alister?
Something like that, yeah. It's quite entertaining, yes.
So I'll put a link to that down in the description.
It gives you a little bit of insight into me and what I might be like when I'm shooting stuff.
When you're not quite as casual and calm and relaxed.
Yeah, not quite as casual, not quite as calm. And, yeah, and addiction to sweeties and candy.
Okay, yes, I haven't quite seen that side. Okay, right, thank you very much. I'll see you very soon.
Bye all.
This stream is powered by Wirecast, a powerful multi-input switching and graphics solution for live streaming in any situation.